Have you ever wondered why some substances move effortlessly in and out of our cells, while others require a bit more effort? Well, in this video, we'll answer exactly that. There are many different kinds of substances that need to get in and out of the cell. To do this, they need to pass through the cell membrane. This is known as membrane transport. There are different ways that substances can pass through the cell membrane. The cell membrane is semi-permeable, meaning that some things can move through it while others can't. This selective nature of the membrane helps the cell to control or maintain its internal environment and carry out its functions effectively. Some substances are able to simply pass through the membrane. This movement is powered by a concentration gradient, or the natural tendency of substances to move from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. This natural flow, which doesn't require energy, is called passive transport. Small nonpolar molecules such as oxygen and carbon dioxide can move directly through the membrane in a process known as simple diffusion. Molecules will follow this gradient until they reach equilibrium, when both sides of the membrane have equal concentrations. Some substances are unable to pass through the membrane on their own and require the assistance of protein channels. These channels span through the membrane and allow substances to flow through them freely down the concentration gradient. The channel is essentially a tunnel through the membrane. One example of this is aquaporins, which are protein channels that facilitate the movement of water across the cell membrane. We know that water can move across the membrane by simple diffusion, but it can only move at a slow speed. In situations where a cell requires rapid movement of water, cells then use these aquaporin channels to speed up the process. When diffusion requires the help or support of a protein channel, we call it facilitated diffusion. Cells often require specific concentrations of substances, either high or low, that don't necessarily follow the concentration gradient. In this case, cells must actively transport substances to maintain these unequal concentrations. This process requires energy in the form of ATP and is known as active transport. This means that there is an equal concentration of molecules inside and outside the cell, and cells must actively transport substances to maintain these concentrations. Transport proteins and channels are two types of proteins that are involved in facilitating the movement of substances across cell membranes. While channels provide a passageway for small molecules to move across the membrane, transport proteins are specialized molecules that are embedded in the cell membrane. The transport proteins can bind to specific molecules and change shape to transport the molecules across the membrane. Transport channels allow for the passive movement of substances down their concentration gradient, while transport proteins enable active transport, which requires ATP to move substances against their concentration gradient. Very large molecules, like insulin from the pancreas for example, also need to get in and out of cells. Because they're too large to pass through the membrane on their own or with the help of a transport protein, they use a special method called vesicle transport. When the cell needs to release large molecules, it packages them into a vesicle. The vesicle then merges with the cell membrane, releasing its contents to the outside of the cell. This is called exocytosis. In comparison, when large molecules need to get inside a cell, the cell membrane wraps around them, forming a bubble-like vesicle. This process is called endocytosis. Both endocytosis and exocytosis require energy in the form of ATP. In summary, membrane transport encompasses various mechanisms. Transport can happen through passive transport like simple diffusion or facilitated diffusion, active transport, or vesicle transport. These various methods of transport enable all kinds of molecules to move in and out of cells, ensuring that cells have access to all the molecules that they need to maintain their proper functions.